The air in Jacksonville was heavy that morning, not with rain, but with questions. Local news had teased a mystery guest set to appear alongside Governor Ron DeSantis at the Bridges Over Borders Summit. The summit, once seen as routine, now felt electric. Most assumed it would be a European prime minister or perhaps a Silicon Valley executive. But as black SUVs pulled into the venue and cameras zoomed in, murmurs turned into gasps. Out stepped Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young African president who had captured global attention with his fierce independence and refusal to bow to Western pressure. Some in the crowd clapped, others whispered, unsure of what his presence meant. Why Florida? Why now? Inside the auditorium, Governor DeSantis smiled tightly. He hadn't been told who the guest speaker was until that morning, and he didn't like surprises. Backstage, Traoré glanced at his note cards, then at the faces gathering before him. Somewhere in the crowd sat a 9-year-old boy holding a cardboard sign that read, "My dad got deported. Please help us." That sign changed everything. Traoré folded his note cards, looked out toward the audience, and made a decision that would shake the world. Governor DeSantis approached the podium first. "We're here to talk about global cooperation, but Florida will never bow to foreign influence," he said, earning a round of applause. Then he introduced Traoré. "A controversial leader," he called him. "Let's hear what he has to say." The young Burkinabe president walked slowly to the microphone. He didn't pull out his notes. He didn't even glance at the governor. Instead, he looked at the little boy with the sign. He spoke softly at first, almost like he was telling a bedtime story. "Back home in Burkina Faso," he said, "we have children like that boy. Some lose their fathers to war, some lose them to poverty. But here, in this powerful land, you lose them to paperwork." Gasps. "I didn't come here to argue policy," he continued. "I came to ask, when did we stop seeing children as human?" The room went dead quiet. DeSantis shifted uncomfortably. News crews leaned in. Then Traoré turned directly to the governor and said, "You speak of strength, but the strongest man in the room is the one who bends down to protect the smallest child." It wasn't just a speech. It was a challenge. The silence cracked. DeSantis stepped forward, visibly rattled. "With all due respect, Mr. Traoré, America doesn't take lectures on morality from a man leading a country with its own issues." Traoré didn't move. His face stayed calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. "I'm not here to shame America," he replied. "I'm here because America promised the world something, a dream. But where is that dream for this child?" He pointed to the boy again. The camera zoomed in. Tears welled in the child's eyes, and many in the audience looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. "Let's not be dramatic," DeSantis retorted, trying to laugh it off. "This is a political discussion, not a sermon." But then Traoré said something that froze everyone in their seats. "You asked me to come here and speak of bridges," he said. "But you don't want bridges, you want walls." And then he pulled a folded letter from his jacket. "This," he said, holding it up, "was written by a Haitian nurse who died off the coast of Florida trying to reach your shores. Her last words, 'If I had been born in Miami, I'd be alive today.'" People gasped. One woman sobbed. The room had changed. Traoré unfolded the crumpled paper with reverence, as if it were sacred. The room, packed with officials, journalists, and Floridian families, held its breath. "She was 29, he began, his voice breaking slightly. "Her name was Emilienne, a nurse. She had helped deliver over 60 babies in a town with no running water. She died clinging to a piece of driftwood, just 20 miles from this shore." People in the front row bowed their heads. One journalist was visibly crying. Her final words, written in pencil and tucked into a plastic bottle, were these: "Please tell America we only swim because we believe in her. Please don't hate us for trying." A hush fell like a blanket over the room. DeSantis's aides exchanged nervous glances. Traoré wasn't preaching. He was bleeding. His voice trembled not with anger, but with mourning. Then he slowly placed the letter on the podium and looked out over the crowd. If justice means locking doors on drowning neighbors, then perhaps justice needs a new name, he said softly. A slow clap started in the back of the hall, then another. Soon the entire room stood. For the first time that day, Governor DeSantis had nothing to say. As the applause died down, something unexpected happened. The little boy with the cardboard sign stood up from his seat. He held his sign high, his hands shaking, and shouted, "My dad is not a criminal." His voice cracked with fear and defiance. He was just 9, but in that moment, he had more courage than the adults around him. Security moved to escort him out, but Traoré raised his hand. "Let him speak," he said firmly. The room again fell silent. The boy continued, "My dad worked at the farm. He helped people. Then ICE took him. I just want him to come home." Traoré walked off the stage, down the steps, and knelt beside the boy. Cameras followed every movement. "What's your name, young warrior?" Traoré asked. "Gabriel," the boy whispered. Traoré nodded. "Gabriel, you have done more for justice in 2 minutes than many do in a lifetime." He stood and turned back to the crowd. "This is why I came. Not to talk policy, but to bring truth, to put a face on the forgotten." Many in the audience wept openly. What began as a political summit was now a moral reckoning. DeSantis looked cornered, but worse, exposed. That night, the clip of Gabriel and Traoré hit the internet. Within hours, it was trending on every platform. The hashtag #let Gabriel's dad come home exploded. TikTok creators reacted with tears. Instagram flooded with artwork of Traoré kneeling beside Gabriel. Celebrities shared the video. One NBA player posted, "This man speaks more truth in 5 minutes than I've heard in years." DeSantis's press team scrambled. Their statement, calling Traoré's actions emotional theatrics, backfired badly. Americans weren't just sympathizing, they were mobilizing. Protests erupted in cities across the country. In Tampa, thousands marched holding cardboard signs that read, "My dad, my mom, my sister, bring them home." Meanwhile, back in Jacksonville, the summit was in chaos. Delegates from other nations approached Traoré privately, offering solidarity and asking for advice. Inside a private chamber, DeSantis confronted Traoré again. "You've turned this into a circus," he snapped. But Traoré, calm and composed, replied, "If telling the truth causes a circus, maybe the problem isn't the tent. It's the people pretending to be lions." Outside the room, another story was unfolding. ICE quietly reviewing Gabriel's father's case. The boy who stood up might get his father back, and the world was watching closely. While the public watched the viral moment unfold, a storm brewed behind closed doors. Governor DeSantis held a private meeting with top advisors. His jaw was clenched. His hands never left the table. "This is spiraling out of control," one aide warned. "People are calling Traoré a hero." "We need to shift the narrative," DeSantis growled. "Start digging into his past. Find something. Anything." But there was a problem. Traoré had no scandals, no offshore accounts, no ugly secrets. The worst they could find? That he once gave away his own presidential salary to build schools in villages. Outside, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Traoré sat quietly with Gabriel's mother. Her hands trembled as she showed him a picture of her husband. He called every night until they moved him. Then, nothing. Traoré listened, really listened. Then he made a quiet phone call to a civil rights lawyer in New York. "Get me an emergency appeal," he said. "I'll fund it myself." Meanwhile, protests intensified. School children in Tallahassee held a silent walkout. A mural of Gabriel went up in Miami overnight. The pressure was mounting. DeSantis wasn't just losing control of the summit. He was losing control of Florida. At 3 a.m., with no press, no cameras, and only one bodyguard, Ibrahim Traoré made an unannounced visit to the Immigration Detention Center on the edge of Duval County. He signed in under a false name. The guards didn't know who he was. He walked past silent corridors, iron doors, and faces pressed against tiny windows. When he finally reached the unit where Gabriel's father, Miguel, was held, the man was curled in a blanket, unaware of who had come. Traoré sat beside him and gently tapped his shoulder. Miguel looked up, confused. Traoré spoke first. "Your son spoke for you." And the world listened. Miguel broke into tears. "No one's ever cared like this," he whispered. "I just wanted a better life for him." Traoré nodded. "And that makes you a father, not a criminal." They spoke for 20 minutes, about family, about sacrifice, about dignity. Then Traoré stood, eyes heavy. "I'll do everything I can, I promise." Back at the summit, news of his secret visit leaked. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was real, human. Even conservative outlets couldn't spin it. Suddenly, the world wasn't just admiring Traoré. They were loving him. With polls showing Florida citizens now favorably viewing Traoré, DeSantis was livid. "We're losing the narrative," he shouted to his team. His next move shocked everyone. He called a last-minute press conference and announced, "We're launching a new program to review cases of nonviolent immigrants who have strong family ties in Florida, starting with one boy's plea, Gabriel." But instead of applause, the room fell into uneasy silence. Traoré, watching from a monitor backstage, leaned forward. "Now he acts," he muttered. Reporters weren't buying it either. One raised her hand. "Governor, why now? Is this about policy or pressure?" DeSantis hesitated. "It's about justice," he claimed, but his voice lacked conviction. Meanwhile, outside, Gabriel and his mother were watching the news live. When the boy saw his father's name mentioned, he leapt into his mother's arms and cried uncontrollably. "Daddy's coming home?" Traoré stood at a window above the crowd. He wasn't smiling, not yet. He had seen too many promises broken. But something had shifted, not just in politics, but in the hearts of people. This wasn't just about immigration anymore. This was about truth, about empathy, about a boy who stood up, and a leader who knelt beside him. It started with 3 women, immigrant mothers who had watched Traoré's speech online. They each held a photo, one of a detained son, another of a deported husband, and one of a missing brother. They met outside the Jacksonville courthouse at dawn. Then came 20 more, then hundreds. By sunset, over 3,000 mothers and children marched through the city, holding signs that read, "Listen to Ibrahim, my family is not illegal, and let them come home." It wasn't political. It was human. As the march reached City Hall, Traoré appeared unexpectedly on the steps. No security, no cameras, just a microphone. He didn't shout. He whispered, "If love for family is a crime, then every mother here is guilty, and I stand guilty with you." The crowd erupted in sobs and cheers. One mother collapsed from exhaustion. Traoré rushed down and held her hand. He stayed until paramedics arrived. Meanwhile, the governor's team watched in disbelief. "This isn't a protest," one aide whispered. "It's a movement." That night, a drone shot of the march flooded every screen in America. One thing was now certain. This wasn't about DeSantis anymore. It was about something bigger. 3 days later, under heavy scrutiny and mounting public pressure, ICE made a decision. Miguel was released. Gabriel waited on the front steps of his Jacksonville apartment, wearing the same red hoodie he wore at the summit. He clutched a toy plane, one his father had given him 2 years ago before being taken. When Miguel finally stepped out of the black van, Gabriel didn't run. He froze, his hands trembled. Then his father opened his arms and softly said, "Mi campeón." Gabriel dropped the plane and sprinted forward, leaping into his arms. They collapsed into each other, crying so hard that even the officers nearby turned away. News crews captured it all. But what stood out wasn't the cameras. It was the people. Neighbors flooded the street. Strangers brought food. A woman wrapped Gabriel in a blanket and whispered, "He's your hero now." Later that night, Traoré visited the reunited family. No fanfare. Just a quiet knock on the door. Miguel hugged him tightly. "I have no words," he said. "You already gave the world the only words it needed," Traoré replied. "You gave them Gabriel." For the first time in years, the boy slept peacefully. And across America, millions cried with him. As the emotional waves rippled across the country, a phone call arrived at the governor's office. It wasn't from a voter. It was from the White House. A senior official warned, "You've turned a summit into a disaster. Traoré's popularity is soaring, even here in the U.S. DeSantis clenched his fist. "He humiliated me." "No," the official replied. "He told the truth, and America listened." Meanwhile, Traoré sat quietly in a small community church with Gabriel's family. A little girl handed him a drawing, stick figures of him, Gabriel, and the American flag. On the top, she had written in crayon, "Thank you for saving a family." He smiled. "This is worth more than gold." But Traoré's advisors were worried. "They might try to spin this," one said. "Or worse, try to silence you." Traoré shook his head. "Then they misunderstand something. I'm not here to fight America. I'm here to remind her who she promised to be." That night an invitation arrived. CNN wanted a live town hall. Millions would tune in. And Traoré would have one more chance to speak directly to the hearts of Americans. But no one was ready for what he'd reveal on live TV. The studio was packed. Millions tuned in across the country. Some expected a political debate. Others expected conflict. But what they got was something much deeper. Traoré entered the stage in his signature green uniform, not as a politician, but as a soldier of the people. The moderator began with a simple question. "Why are you here?" Traoré took a breath. "I came because one boy stood up when the world sat down." Then, without warning, he pulled out a photo. It showed a mass grave in Burkina Faso. "This is what happens when justice is denied for too long. I lead a country where the world looks away. But I believed America would look closer. So I came." The audience went quiet. He turned to the camera. "You have the most powerful tools: media, law, voice. But the strongest weapon is your heart. If you still feel pain when you see children cry, then your nation can still be saved." A woman in the front row sobbed uncontrollably. Even the moderator was speechless. Across America, phones buzzed, tears flowed, and something strange happened. People didn't change the channel. They leaned in closer. A woman stood during the audience Q&A. Her voice shook as she spoke. "My name is Lorraine. I voted for DeSantis, twice. But I watched what you did for Gabriel. And I just want to ask, why would you do this? Why care about our children when the world ignores yours?" The room held its breath. Traoré didn't answer right away. He looked down, then slowly raised his head, eyes glistening. "Because when our house is on fire, we don't ask if the child inside is ours. We just go in." The crowd gasped. Lorraine broke into tears. "That's what leadership should be," she whispered. Then a teen boy stood. "Can I hug you, sir?" Traoré nodded, and the boy ran forward. The hug was long, sincere, and televised live. Hashtags exploded again. Ibrahim speaks. America listens, and one world family. Backstage, DeSantis's communications team watched in horror. "This isn't a foreign leader anymore," one staffer said. "He's becoming a symbol." But the night wasn't over. Just as the cameras prepared to cut, the moderator asked one final question. "What would you say to Governor DeSantis if he were sitting here right now?" Traoré paused, and what he said next would stun the world. Traoré leaned forward toward the camera. His voice was steady but soft, almost like a prayer. "If Governor DeSantis were here, I would say, I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, but because hate cannot heal what only grace can mend." The silence in the studio was so deep, you could hear someone gasp off camera. "I would invite him," Traoré continued, "not to a debate, but to dinner, with Gabrielle, with Miguel, with the families, and maybe then he'll understand that no wall can block the cry of a child." The room erupted in tears. Journalists lowered their cameras, overcome with emotion. Outside, thousands watched from city squares, airport terminals, hospital waiting rooms. Police officers, teachers, students, people from every walk of life, wiped away tears they didn't expect to shed. That one sentence, "I forgive you," became the quote of the year. It was printed on T-shirts, painted on murals, tattooed on hearts. Traoré had done what few ever could. He turned division into reflection, pain into healing, and as he walked off stage, he whispered to his aide, "Now, the real work begins." But no one knew what was coming next, and the story wasn't over. 3 days after the town hall, Jacksonville was quiet, but only on the surface. Across Florida, conversations shifted. Families talked, schools held discussions, churches and mosques played clips of Traoré's words during services, and then something no one predicted happened. Governor Ron DeSantis showed up, without cameras, without a statement. Just a black car, a staffer, and his nervous eyes. He walked up the steps of a small church where Miguel, Gabriel, and other immigrant families were meeting with Traoré for a private dinner. The air was thick with disbelief. DeSantis paused at the door, then asked the pastor, "May I come in?" Inside, Gabriel spotted him first. He froze. His small hand gripped his father's arm. Then Traoré stood, calm, steady, unmoving. DeSantis walked forward, extended his hand, and said words that stunned the room. "I watched the boy. I watched the letter. I watched you. I don't agree with everything you stand for, but I was wrong." The room was silent. And then Traoré shook his hand. Not because he had to, but because forgiveness was stronger than politics. There were no microphones, no podiums, just one long table filled with plates of rice, grilled plantains, and quiet conversations. DeSantis sat at the end, awkward at first, surrounded by families he once ignored. Gabriel kept glancing at him, unsure. Then Traoré did something no one expected. He asked the boy to lead grace before the meal. Gabriel stood, voice shaky but strong. "God, thank you for bringing my daddy home. Thank you for Mr. Ibrahim, and thank you that people can change." Tears flooded the room. Even DeSantis looked down, eyes red. During the meal, he listened to stories of deportations, hunger, silence, and strength. He heard the voice of America, not from politicians, but from those who lived in its shadow. And that night, something inside him cracked open. Before leaving, DeSantis whispered to Traoré, "You did what I couldn't. You saw people." Traoré replied, "It's not too late to start." That dinner wasn't just a moment. It was a turning point, and across the nation, millions began to ask the same question. If he could change, can we? Weeks passed. Gabriel's story became part of classrooms. His drawing with Traoré and the flag was displayed in a Florida museum. Donations poured in to reunite other families. The Bridge Act, a new bill inspired by the summit, gained bipartisan support in Congress. But for Traoré, the victory wasn't in policy. It was in people. Before leaving Florida, he visited Gabriel one last time. They sat on a porch swing. Traoré gave the boy a gift, a small wooden plane, hand-carved from Burkina Faso. "Fly high, Gabriel," he said, "and never stop speaking truth." Then he turned to the camera, his eyes full of truth, his voice calm but piercing. To everyone watching, if this story moved your heart, don't just watch. Be the voice Gabriel was. Be the courage his father showed. Be the leader your own family needs. Like this video, if you believe compassion is stronger than politics. Comment the word hope if this story touched you, and hit subscribe, not just for more stories, but because together we are building something bigger than videos. We're building bridges, across nations, across hearts, across the silence. Let's not wait for another Gabriel. Let's change the story, now.